make a big noise, playing in the street, gonna be a big man someday. You got mud on your face, you big disgrace, kicking your can all over the place, singing, we will rock you.
Welcome back to part 2 of the Stack RC Cobra build, and you're with Jason at TVRC. So we're starting this video off by removing all of these self-tapping flathead screws, and the reason for this is I'm going to be swapping out those self-tappers with M3 machine screws with a hex drive head. So what I wanted to do was take this tap, put it into my drill, and drop it into low gear. And very carefully, I'm going to go about winding this tap into and out of each of the plastic components by removing a little bit of material and cutting that M3 thread neatly into these components. Now, I like to do this because it's not forcing anything. It's not going to split or, become an issue. So I like to put a thread in there. So anyway, in the previous video, I talked about the bearings being a little bit tight going onto each of the steel out drives. So I would just take a couple of sockets, take a small hammer, just tap them together lightly, and you'll send them home neatly, ready to go into the transmission. So speaking of going into the transmission, I noted in the manual that they preferred that the adjustment screw for that ball diff center faces out the right-hand side of the transmission housing. And here we are. I'm just turning the lay shaft gear there, running the idler then onto the ball diff center there. Now let's button this transmission back up and put these M3 screws all the way in. Just illustrating here where the motor plate rides on the transmission housing. And here we are. Let's talk about anti-squat. So standard, this car has anti-squat mounts built into the transmission housing. So these are not optional. They're part of that housing. And this is what the anti-squat looks like on the chassis in the standard configuration. So speaking to Oliver about the car, I also did mention, look, are they going to do anything mid-motor, and what was the deal with that Evo? And he did mention to me that when you spin this transmission housing, this is what you're left with. Now, I don't know if this is something that was tackled by Made previously, but let's just say, surely that angle there is going to be, well, a little unfortunate when it comes to handling characteristics of this car. So anyone who thought spinning the transmission around is going to be a good idea, you might want to consider the anti-squat that is built into the transmission housing. So yeah, if you know more about it than I do, leave me a comment in the comment section and let me know. So, okay, let's get the transmission housing and the rear end back together on this chassis. Such simplicity. You've got to love it, right? So again, I'm just winding that tap into the components, making sure that they receive the M3 screws nicely. And I've just put a couple of nuts there on the end of those screws to hold that shock tower, just in case things rattle loose. So being a British car, I went with an old British manufactured motor. So this is the MG Magnum, and it's a 16 triple. Now, I did pull it apart. I treated the com, replaced the brushes, cleaned it all out, re-oiled the bearings, and went with this 16 triple because it's not going to be a very wild motor. It's not going to have a great deal of torque. And to be honest, it's quite old. The magnets have probably lost a lot of their power anyway. But here we are looking at the gearbox ratio of 2.8821. That is the internal ratio of the transmission on the Cobra. So this was the standard slipper arrangement. Now, cool, it's got a lot of potential here, but they missed out having any slipper pads in it, and that's how it was standard from the factory, the original car back in the day. So I thought to myself, how can I go about modifying or adapting another spur gear to that slipper hub? So it ended up finding that the Shoemaker spur gears fit, and of course these Wasp gears fitment for the Shoemaker. So yeah, for anyone that doesn't know, you glue these little sandpaper discs onto the slipper, and the slipper pads sort of bind up on one side with the sandpaper, and of course the other side runs off the aluminium housing of the slipper. And I thought, you know what, let's just have a bit of a play around. Let's just see if I can make this thing work. So I snapped it all into place, but what I found was that the gear and the slipper pads, they just took up too much space. So I kind of forced them into place and went it down nice and tight without the slipper actually working, which was kind of silly. But anyway, you got to learn these things as you go. So I'm taking these little nice little alloy taper washers to fasten the motor to the plate. But even with the lowest amount of adjustment, the lowest point on that motor plate, you can see there's not enough room in there even to fit a pinion. So that's not going to happen. So let's go back to the drawing board. I'm going to go with a standard 83 tooth spur, 28 tooth pinion. That gets me very close to 8.5 to 1, which is a good starting point for this car with that motor. So anyway, let's get the spur gear cover on and let's get ready for some electrics. So first of all, it's time to put the servo in. So I've gone with this old FET booster box servo, wanting to keep everything old school, not looking for the ultimate performance, just wanted to have a crack with all these old cool electrics. So I created myself a little ESC tray to go on top of the battery there, followed with this Tekin. And it's time to solder this little bad boy into place. And really, most people know how to solder, but for those who don't, obviously, I like to keep my wiring very neat. And it's time to tin the wire ahead of soldering. So here we go, just an example. There are some people who aren't great at it, so that's just why I've added it to the video. If it helps you out at all, you're welcome. So just making sure there's enough solder on that tab there to hold that wire into place without it sort of overheating and coming off. And there you are. That's the neatest job I can do of it. And let's adjust this ESC. So back in the day, they had these trim pots in your ESC, and that's how you get the adjustment to your radio and adjusting the torque, neutral position, and the throttle. And with this car, it came with left and right hand threaded tie rods. So what I decided to do was secure a nut in place nice and firmly, reassemble, and put back on the car. It just allows a little bit easier adjustment when you want to change your camber or your toe settings up the front. Just by having a nut there in place, you can turn around with a wrench. Anyway, works for me. So now it's time to look at a radio for this car. So being everything is going to be old school, the motor, the ESC, the servo, let's do an old radio. So I've gone with a KO EX5 wheel radio. This is one of my favorite radios from back in the day, and I still love it now. So it's an old 29 megahertz AM radio. Here's the receiver that came with that radio back in the day. It's only a 2-channel, of course. And guess what? For those who don't realize, all the old school electrics, they used to run off crystals, that you had to have a identifying channel. And this is a sticker I've had since forever. And this box I've had forever. So yeah, I used to run 29 megahertz radio, and these are my old crystals from back in the 80s. So you'll have one which will be for the receiver and the other will be for the transmitter. You don't want to get those mixed up. So you just go and insert that crystal into the back of this radio. That's the TX crystal, and then you've got the RX crystal to go into the receiver. Pretty simple, but that's how it was back in the day. Just installing some double-sided tape. Let's get this receiver stuck down to the chassis, and it's time now to take the wire from the steering servo, and that's going to go into channel 1. That comes from the booster box after the servo. And then, of course, we have got channel 2 for the Tekin ESC. We're going to fiddle around with this and make sure that the polarity is correct, because you don't want anything to let some smoke out. And it's time now to push the aerial into the aerial tube. So this is the aerial that came, or the tube that came with the car. So it's got a little rubber cap there. And just securing it off now with the clamp to the rear shock tower. And then we are all neatly tied up, ready for a little bit of action. So back in the day, I used to run these Dean's 4-pin battery connectors, and I still like to play around with them today. Let's get the radio on. Switch on the ESC. Okay, so off camera, I've managed to paint the wing and the body, and this was the outcome, and I'm really happy with it. Let me know in the comment section what you think. I think it looks very cool. I reckon I could see this thing running around over in Great Britain back in the day, ripping up the grass. So yeah, let's extend the aerial on the EX5 wheel radio, switch it on, turn the car on and let's give it a bit of a rip. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? Of course you are. That thing is as slow as a wet week. And it has been a wet week, but today the sunshine decided to come out. And please keep in mind, this old 1400 NiCad is probably as old as the hills, really. Now, I used to race with those batteries back in the 80s, and I don't know how old this battery is, but I put it on a peak charger and got it nice and warm. And I was barely lucky, I think, to even see 900 milliamp hours go into that battery from a dead flat battery. The running part of this video was never going to set anyone's hair alight. It's more for Andrew, who donated the car to the channel. I know he was busting to see this thing finished and probably moving under its own weight. So I thought, look, let's get it out to the field. And I probably got maybe, I don't know, 3 or 4 minutes of runtime. But look, it was a fun little experiment to do. But what I want to do is take it up to the vintage muster and give someone else a run, and I'll get the camera out and get some cool video of it running. Thanks for checking out the video, and go check out Stack RC for a COBRA yourself.
Buddy, you're a boy, make a big noise, playing in the street, gonna be a big man someday. You got mud on your face, you big disgrace, kicking your can all over the place.